Good afternoon and welcome once again. I'm Neil, your confident contractor, where I can help you become a confident contractor and give you hints and tips about how to run a limited company. So today, what are we talking about? We are talking about pricing and rate negotiation. Two very important areas, because if we get onto the thingamabobs, oh, here we are, click over there. Clicky, clicky, here, the clicks are working, good. So, it's important that you should get pricing correct because, after all, it ensures your profitability. The profitability is the thing that keeps your business afloat. Without profit, your business will die. And without a business, then you might have to go get a job. It also sets the foundation for a level, within your business. Are you pitching at a specific market, or do you have some other reasoning for where your price is? And we'll get into a lot of those factors shortly. Pricing also gives you an indication of perceived quality to your customers. If you're charging a high value because you provide a lot of value, then there's going to be a high price to go along with that. If you're doing a lower cost version and therefore lower prices, then the marketing and the competitors will be different. So, how can you set your pricing? What factors should you consider when setting a price? Market demand is easily the obvious thing to look for. So I was fortunate enough to do business studies when I was at college, and they show you this lovely picture. I wish I had it on these slides actually. There's a picture of supply and demand, and it essentially says the more that you supply a good, then no, the other way around. The higher the price that people will pay for a good, the more that you as a supplier are willing to provide it. So what I mean by that is, if you've got a chocolate factory, hooray, and you make chocolate, no kidding. Now, if the market price for chocolate, right, is say £2 a bar, then you're going to want to sell more of those than if it's only 50p a bar. You're not going to want to sell so many. So it's how much you're willing to supply based on what the price is. So this means you get an upward curve going off to the right. The higher the price, the more supply there is on the market. Conversely, from the demand side, your buyers, it cuts the graph cuts across it that way, because if your price is really low, 50p a bar of chocolate, how many people do you think will want to buy at that price? Probably loads. And if it's £2 for a bar of chocolate, how many people are going to want to buy there? And there'll be not as many because it's more expensive. And so that's why it goes the opposite way. And then there's a thing called market equilibrium, which is where those two lines cross. So it's the price at which the suppliers are willing to supply a set number of goods, at the same time as the number of buyers that want to buy those number of goods. And that's the perfect equilibrium. Of course, it doesn't actually exist, it's all theory, but it gives you some guidelines as to where you pitch your price. So the market demand, if it's higher, will let you pitch a higher price. Then we got your skills and expertise. This is about the quality of the product that you're providing. If you're providing a quality product, people will pay more for it. People will pay more for I'm trying to think of something that's not brand based. To take a loaf of bread. People will pay more for the fresh baked in-store bread than they will for the pre-packaged white sliced bread. Now, even if you're going into Sainsbury's, for an example, it'll both say Sainsbury's branding on it. You know, you'll have the Sainsbury's cheap bread and you'll have the Sainsbury's freshly baked in store. It's a higher quality product, and therefore they can charge more for it. So the more you can define your skills and expertise, and the better those skills are, the higher quality product you provide means a higher price. And then there's industry standards. So these are all set against a background of the market and the industry generally. Now, I specialize in DevOps, whatever that means, and a DevOps engineer, again something else made up, but there's a DevOps engineer in recruiting circles, in contracting, and it will say it's about £500 a day. And that's kind of about. You'll find people that will pitch lower than that because maybe their skills, feeding back to the previous slide, their skills are more junior. And there's people that will pitch higher than that because their skills and experience are greater and therefore more valuable. And so we've got all these factors stacking on top of each other. What is the demand for the skills? What is the industry baseline, if you like, for that particular role? And how do you and your service compare to that baseline? And then we can't go much further without mentioning the client budget. And this is the other demand side of things. If the client doesn't have much budget, then they're not going to be able to buy the higher quality resources that they really need. They're going to be constrained slightly to be going with average or junior in my previous example. But it depends on who you want to work for. You might want to work for just the banks because they pay better. Great. Those clients have got a bigger budget. Or you might want to work for charities and startups who have less budget. And therefore that will also feed into how much you charge. So now we've said how you can set the value that you charge your customers. What sort of models are there available? Well, easily the most popular one is billing based on hours worked and materials used. Now, you might not use many materials, but you might have expenses, traveling or food or yellow post-it notes. That's what I was trying to think of. Other such materials, software licenses, that kind of thing. Some of those might be chargeable to the client, but primarily based on the hours worked, the hours delivered and signed off on a timesheet by your customer. Now, more rarer is a fixed price. Now, I have seen other suppliers do a fixed price for a whole project. I want a website designed. I want it to be delivered within 3 weeks, and I'm going to charge you a fixed price for that. It's not related to how many hours it takes you to do, but there is a deadline when the client needs it by, and there's a fixed price. So whether you do it quicker means you get paid more per hour. If you do it slower, you get paid less per hour, as long as it's delivered by the deadline. And then there's a retainer kind of model. And this is most often used when we're talking about on-call services. Certainly in my industry, if you're a cloud engineer or an infrastructure engineer, then the client will pay you a certain amount of money just to be on standby. And then if you actually get called out, then you get paid a higher amount, because at that point you're performing the role and working. So a retainer or a standby is kind of another way of billing the customer. You have a baseline level, and then you bill on top of that. So with all those factors in play, how do we actually negotiate the price with the customer? I mean, first, it's important to understand the value you bring to a customer. Now, I was in negotiations recently, and I told the customer that the reason why I charge extra is because of the experience that I have. I also explained how much time and money their developers will save as a direct result of me implementing some automated processes. He seemed to like those because he hired me for the role. And so you can also understand the value that you bring to a client, and then make sure you tell them. Of course, you need to have this baseline again. So I told you what it is, and researching is so that you can find out what it is for your particular, rate. Now, what are others around you charging based on their skills and the baseline? And then that gives you a certain level where you can start negotiations. And again, there's going to be a high amount of value that you offer to the customer. Now, like most things, when a customer says they want to drill, they don't really want to drill. They want a hole in the wall in exactly the right place and at exactly the right size. So if you emphasize the outcomes of your services, then that's what the customer really wants to hear. They don't want to pay you 7 hours or 8 hours a day to sit at a desk and talk amongst the devs, nice as that might be. They want to know what value and what outcomes you're going to deliver. Yeah. I will deliver you an automated pipeline, and rather than your developers having to manually build and version and push code that could take a couple of hours, the automated pipeline will do that, run the tests, and publish some code, and it will take about 10 minutes. In that 10 minutes, your developer can move on to the next ticket, or something like that. And having flexibility can play into your part and to their part. So perhaps you have a customer who is expecting some more work later on. So how can we accommodate that budget like that? Well, maybe we have the flexibility where we can say, well, that's great. I know you don't need my services full time right now, and you might not be able to afford my services full time right now. So how about we start at 2 days a week? And then we can build up to where it's a full-time position of 5 days a week until we deliver the outcomes that you require. It's also important to note that when you're setting the price, you need to know what your costs are. What are your expenses, and what is your desired margin of profit, or just take-home pay in this case. If you're happy in a lifestyle where you only need 50k a year, then you can put your expenses on there, and then you know what your bottom line is when you're negotiating with your customers. Be forearmed with that knowledge, and define the unique value that your services offer. What skills do you have? What experience do you have that's very specific to what the client wants? Let's go back to the example. A little while ago, I did a CV session, And I've got two CVs. One is quite generic. It says I'm a DevOps engineer, I've delivered these projects. But if I know it's going to a specific client, I can research that client and I can tailor that CV so it highlights the skills and experience that they're most interested in for that particular project. And that's going to get a better response than them having to look through the generic CV. And sometimes you'll need to offer different prices based on the client needs. I kind of touched on this earlier with flexibility. Can you be flexible enough to do 2 days a week, then 3 days a week, then 4 days a week, and it grows? Or maybe you have a number of customers. If you've branched out into the consulting stage of things, you can have different packages. So we'll say you pay us a retainer. This means that you can contact me on instant messaging at any time during the work day, and I will respond to you. That's a certain level. And then on top of that, we add in, and you get me on site every Monday for the whole day as an add-on to that. And you can put those two together and create that as a package. Maybe the customer needs is different to that. So you can put different packages together based on what your customer wants. And then, of course, nothing stands still. Market demand doesn't stand still, and market supply doesn't stand still. There are seasonal variances in IT land. Not much happens in August, not much happens in December. That's kind of the same for a lot of the business world. And so based on when your contracts are renewing, you might have a slightly different tactic. And then from year to year, the supply and demand changes the market all the time. Are big companies laying off staff? Are there more available people in the market? Or like a couple of years ago, is there nobody available in the market and everyone's trying to hire? If there's low demand, then there's low prices. High demand is high prices. And so once you've gone through this exercise once, you should probably review it every time you go for a negotiation or a company renew or a new client or something like that, because nothing stands still. So if you want to know more and you feel like you're ready to step up to the plate and be a confident contractor, not quite sure how to start, you can start by filling in our quiz. This will give you some answers to some of the questions that you might have, and then you can join me and I can help you work together on getting you to a confident contractor. That's all I've got for today, so thanks for listening and I'll see you next time.